Hello everyone, and a good day to all of you. I wanted to give a first impressions sort of review on the PSA AK-101, which is what this is right here. I only have a couple hundred rounds on here, so it's not really my regular review per se, where I usually like to get at least 1,000 rounds through it. But my reasoning for doing this one differently is because there is so much talk about how the PSA AKs kind of do not wear very well, and I've been wanting a 5.56 AK for a while, so I did pick this one up, and just kind of curious to see how it will fare. So how I'm going to be doing this differently is going to be doing this initial first impressions, and then every probably about 1,000 rounds going forward in the future, I'll do another review and just check how the internals are looking and if there's any issues, or if anything else happens, then I'll make another video at that point. To start with the rifle itself, so my reasoning for getting this rifle, like I said, I did want just a 5.56 AK for several years now, just never really got around to it. But especially recently, I've been kind of getting the urge, the withdrawal from not shooting AKs very much, because the two AKs I do have are in 5.45, which I absolutely love that one. And then my other AK is in 7.62x39, and either way, both of those cartridges are getting pretty hard, especially with 5.45. Very, very rare and very expensive to come across that, which really changed from how things used to be. So as a result, all the more than before, a 5.56 AK was very, very appealing to me. So I picked this up completely with my own money. I'm not a gun influencer, aka shill, where I got this sent to me or cherry picked from PSA. This is actually the only rifle I've ever purchased at this point from PSA. So they absolutely have no idea who I am, and there's no way this could have been cherry picked, which I think will become very obvious. I have some complaints about the rivet work on here, but aside from that, actually I will say reliability thus far has been absolutely perfect. I've had no issues with any of the ammo that I've put through this. It's been good. I'm going to go in kind of chronological order and just talk about very, very first unboxing and assembly, how all these parts fit together. Aside from the rifle itself, the barrel, and the important internals, and the receiver, everything else I installed myself. This was picked up as a one of the side folding, since I do have the triangle stock on here, you can see, side folding barrel assemblies from PSA. So with that in mind, let's get started. So I wanted to take some time here to really go part by part and just give my truly first impressions. As you can see here, I just took this out of the box, and I am going to switch to an overhead camera in a moment so you can see things closer, but I just wanted to start like this so you can kind of see everything, how it came. So right off the bat, what I am noticing is there is a ton of oil on here. You might be able to actually see it kind of glistening off of my lighting. Yeah, right there, especially on the dust cover, there is a huge amount, so that's good. I'm not going to need to worry about any corrosion during shipment. I am, of course, going to wipe off a bunch of this excess. We do have a chamber flag in here, which I'll go ahead and pop that out. Also just a silica packet as well. Good to keep things nice and dry. And one thing I do want to touch on, just because I noticed it, and I was kind of concerned about this myself. So when I was just getting a few parts, I actually pretty much have all the parts for this already, but just had a few I needed to pick up. One thing I was concerned about is that I might need to pick up a stock pin, because this is a side folder. I don't have any spare just 4.5mm pins sitting around, but thankfully this does actually ship with it. I read other reviews saying that it does, but when I first looked at this, I was seeing this like it didn't look like there was one, so I was a little concerned, but no, there is one just right here. You can see I have this little bag, and there's the stock pin in it, so perfect. I don't need to go and pick up one and kind of have to wait for that to ship. That would really suck. But let me get everything taken apart here, and then just a bunch of other assembly information cards, that sort of stuff. Let's just remove those off camera, no point in showing that. I am kind of curious. One thing I think is interesting is that they already have the enhanced sort of safety, so you can just use your index finger right here. And I will say this is very, very, very stiff, probably the stiffest I've got out of the box, so I'll bend this out in a vise later, not a problem there. But let's go ahead and get this chamber flag out. I just wanted to kind of check how stiff the safety was first hand before doing anything else. Now, despite the outside being so oiled, I will note one thing I'm feeling is just that this feels very gritty. It definitely needs a little bit of oil. Now, this is the barrel assembly, so this does actually include I shouldn't say all the internals, but the important ones like the bolt carrier group and recoil spring, dust cover, of course, as you can see. But I'm going to go ahead and take a closer look here, get this opened up, see how the parts are, and inspect the internals. So in my usual fashion, I'm going to go over this from the rear towards the front of the rifle. As I said, let's go ahead and open up this and take a look at the internals first of all. So just a smooth dust cover here, very reminiscent of your actual AK-100 series. Regular stamped type of recoil spring guide. Feels about to be pretty expected average weight there as well. Regular PSA piston, I don't see any issues here. Of course, you do have the exposed rivet, which I kind of do like because I probably will switch this out with a KNS piston. It just makes it easier to locate exactly where the rivet is and just pop it out. There is no play in this piston, I am noticing. Usually, most of your AKs you'll have a little bit of play, which is how it's designed. But yeah, that one's just rigid all the way across. 5.56 bolt, of course, because this is the AK-101. I don't see any problems here, nothing concerning. Nothing really sticks out as being a problem. Toolcraft logo right there. I believe you have one, yeah, have one on the bolt carrier there as well. One concern I did see a reviewer discuss was on the riveting quality, which if I bring out, actually, it'd be a bit hard for me to definitively say how the quality is, so throughout this I will be bringing up my SLR 104 FR as a point of comparison. It'll be fairly challenging to properly see the rivets on here, especially because I have this hinged top dust cover that I can't fully remove, but if you just look at these rivets here on the rear stock trunnion right there. Of course, this is how they should look here on the SLR 104. I noticed that some of the rivets here are a little uneven. So, for example, on this left one right here, just getting the lighting there, you can see it's a little bit overly smushed right there. The other side looks fine, though I will say maybe a little bit shallower than I would like to see. And it's very, very hard to pick up on the rest of the rivets on the camera. I would say pretty much the same thing as I can see on these rear two that are really easy to see applies to the rest of them. One other thing, kind of somewhat skipping around a little bit, but I did want to touch on the little, this part right here for the actual stock that you can push when it's installed to hinge it. This is, it's pretty small, you can see, fairly undersized. If I remember right, PSA used to not even have this hole cut through it, which they do now, which is nice. But if you look at how that compares to on the SLR right here, you can see that is way smaller. This whole part of the receiver cutout is just a very big gap there in comparison. And on the other side, this little hole is a little, it's actually a little off center, and it's also quite a bit smaller than on the SLR right here. And it's also, this one's rounded, you can see. This one's just a hole. You do have a side mount here, has the regular X and Y markings. Very good, I don't see any problems. I want to move up now to the magazine while I want to check. So this is an AK-101 sort of clone-ish, and I don't have a huge amount of 5.56 AK mags, but I did want to just check how these all fit. So I just have a handful of Bulgarian, just the new production commercial ones here. I have 2 of those, and then I have a really nice Circle 10 one as well, Bulgarian. So this one is excessively tight. Not wanting to lock. Let's check the Circle 10. So that one went in super smoothly. And then this other Bulgarian one is totally fine. Overall, I've found these modern Bulgarian mags to be a pretty solid mag. Generally, they're better than a lot of the other ones out there, but they're not the best. So I wouldn't be surprised if just, the fact that this one fits, but this other one here does not. Probably just a little bit of variance in the quality of these mags themselves, but I do think that this magazine well is probably in spec, given that the Circle 10 fits perfectly fine. And of course, these are all 5.56 AK mags, but they do follow the AK-74 pattern of magazine well, so do keep that in mind. Something like your Galil mags or some of the other 5.56 AKs, because they kind of were never fully standardized. Those will not fit in here, so you do need to make sure to get the right pattern of magazine like these. Moving forward, do have the little locking portion right here for when the stock is folded, and everything looks good, feels good there. Spring is under a good amount of tension, not overly tight either. This does come with a cleaning rod, which apparently these did not used to. I've seen a lot of reviews where people were saying they didn't receive cleaning rods, some did, and yeah, in this case you can see it did. It's a little bit of a loose fit, of course that may be just because I don't have the handguard on, but I will say that I've had on my washer, for instance, even with the handguard off, it's a much tighter fit than this. Up here you can see there's a little bit of play in particular. Do have your 1000 meter rear iron sight. Note that it is not color filled. They do have the Cyrillic there as well, which is cool. I will probably color fill this myself later. I do like having the white filled markings in there. Another thing, speaking of the markings and all that, I did forget to touch on the safety. One other point I wanted to address that I did just notice earlier when I was switching camera angles is that this actually does have the Cyrillic markings there as well. Quite cool. But furthermore, you can see this has the full auto position and the semi-auto position. Now, of course, this is not a full auto, not a select fire gun, so this doesn't do anything. It's just there for cosmetic purposes, but it is cool. It is actually properly done. You can see it will sit in that spot as well. So very cool. And as I said, yeah, this is a very exceedingly stiff safety, so I will fix that later. Moving forward, let's look at the gas tube. That was, I'm used to these being a lot tighter, usually needing to kind of use the bolt carrier for leverage to lift this up, but this one is very, it's not going to come out on its own, but it is on the looser side for sure, quite a bit looser. I think my washer is still looser than this one, but yeah, it should be fine there. Gas tube itself, a little bit excessive wear here out of nowhere. This, of course, is literal first impressions. I haven't shot this or anything. There's just, I don't know what this is. This looks like it got gouged, so that's a little weird. You can't see it when it's fully installed, so that is interesting. It shouldn't affect function, but weird nonetheless. Front sight post does have a roll pin retaining the detent for the muzzle device, and this is a 24 by I believe it's a 24 by 1.5. It's the conventional, just standard AK-100, AK-74 threads. And it does have a clone, just the single chamber brake on here as well, which works great. I'll probably stick with this. I do have a few other, like a flash hider, that I will test on here just because I'm curious how it'll do. But yeah, this works fine. And just so you have a point of comparison for what I'm talking about, so this roll pin right here, here's how you normally would have it. It's just a solid steel pin on most of your AKs, just like that, you can see. And this, by comparison, you can see, that's how it looks on this side. Yeah, just a regular roll pin. Looks a little weird if you really are focusing on the minute details. It should work fine, but interesting. One thing I do find quite strange, which it's going to be kind of impossible to really get a good camera angle here, but this is really an oddly kind of sharp shoulder there on the barrel, you can see, where it will interface with the bolt. Now, I don't have any other 5.56 AKs myself to compare them to, but you know, I've seen pictures, and generally how they'll look is pretty much the same again as this SLR here. You can see it's just a very, you know, you still have a little bit there, but it's really flat by comparison. So I heard that the original PSA AK-101s were having some issues with the extractor having premature wear, and people were thinking it's because of this really sharp edge. I've heard that they've changed this, hence why I did buy this, because it sounds like they fixed the problems. Time will tell, but we'll see how that goes. That is interesting to look at. I've got this all assembled. Now there is some stuff I wanted to talk about, a few extra points that are worth mentioning that I noticed when I was installing all this stuff. But I think more importantly than that is to actually check if it works or not. So going to test fire this, the first shots. I'm going to be using the Circle 10 magazine, and I'm using just full Lake City. I'm not going to fire every round in here, but the reason I'm using this, so Lake City M855 and this mag, which I know is, I mean, I haven't tested it yet, but generally Circle 10 mags are the most reliable possible. So just if there are any issues, it should reduce the amount of potential variables and points of failure. So let's get started here. And I'll be firing some with a side mount. I have a temporary optic for this. I'll get a different one later, but I also am curious how the iron sights, how well zeroed they are. Okay, everything chambered fine, so first shot's right here. So it's ejecting nicely. I'm seeing everything's going about 10 feet out there, so seems decently gassed, not too extremely overgassed. It does feel like it's pretty nicely gassed. There's not a whole lot of recoil on it compared to like my SLR 104. It's pretty intense overgassing on that, but it's nice. Everything's ejecting pretty evenly. No issues so far. I am curious also, I'm gonna check how well just in case any issues are here, I wanna see how rigid their side mount is. I'm using a Midwest Industries with my just an EOTech EXPS32 on top. The side mount itself seems good. Of course, again, I haven't test fired it on this rifle yet, but I'm gonna find out if everything is good with it right now. I tested all the stuff on here that I wanted to. Side mount is nice and rigid. All the mags are working thus far, though the Bulgarian ones are a little bit on the overly tight side. One other thing I did want to check was Vimple. So I'm curious, I'm going to be testing a few different rounds. Vimple, a lot of the Russian 223 back when it was available, tended to be on the somewhat undergassed side, so I was just curious, since it does seem like it's fairly moderately gassed, just to see if this will cycle at all. So I've loaded up 10 rounds. You can see right there is the Vimple lacquered steel case. And I have the dust cover off right now because I want to test one other thing as well. You'll notice I'm using a recoil buffer here for reasons I will explain later, because I usually actually hate these, but there's a reason I'm testing it on here. So let's just see how this goes. Okay, we're good there. Now I wanted to talk about the reason I'm shooting this without the dust cover on is I was testing. So one thing that I noticed when I was firing the M855 Lake City is I was feeling felt like brass fragments coming back and hitting my face. Now I've shot AKs a fair bit when I'm doing tests without the dust cover on, just so I can watch in slow motion how things are going and all that. And I have never felt that on my face with either my 545 or the 7.62 Wasser. So that's why I wanted to test this without the dust cover with steel cased ammo, because I was thinking maybe it's just the fact that it's brass, because the AK does eject differently than an AR. So, you know, it's a little bit more harsh on brass, generally speaking. So I thought maybe this is kind of tearing it up, but I was actually still feeling that a little bit on the steel case that I was firing just now. One other thing I did want to test, last thing on here, was I wanted to test PPU. If this AK-101 here was able to cycle the Vimple, this should be fine, but it's because more people will probably, you know, if you're watching this, you'll probably be able to get this type of ammo, so it'll be a bit better point of comparison. So just like before, I'll load up 10 of these and just see how they work. These are all loaded. There's that 55 grain PPU you can see right there. So let's just see how well these do. All good with that. Cool. So that does it. It's a good amount of first shots to kind of see how this thing is functioning. And so far, so good, of course. Not a whole lot, just a couple mags at most. I did want to talk about the post-assembly, just kind of how everything fit, like I kind of mentioned earlier. So starting, just going rear to front, again, as I usually do, starting with the stock. So I'm using a real Bulgarian 4.5 millimeter stock, which I took off my SLR a long time ago, just have had sitting since. And I had a lot of issues attaching it to this rifle. So several years ago, I did a video on how to remove a side folding pin, because you do need to punch it out a certain direction, everything, just you know, share a bit of information. And when I did that video, I had a lot of people commenting that they were having issues knocking out the pins on their PSA AKs, and I do now see why. It's not that they were doing it wrong, it's that this is an way overly tight fit. So I actually had to pound the stock in with a mallet just to get it to fit between these 2 points on the hinge right here. Way overly tight. Whenever I close it, it actually will tear off a little bit of metal on each side as well. So it's just underneath here, it's totally exposed, just white metal. And overall, it's also just way too tight of a fit back here. This is super solid, I will say, but without a mallet, I'm not going to be able to fold this. I ran into the same issue when I first installed my Zeneco PT3 on my SLR, but even then, it was not as tight as this. Back when I did the review on the PT3, I said this is the most tight stock I've ever had. Congratulations, this is now the most tight stock I've ever had to put on. So it will wear in a little bit over time. I have noticed with the PT3 too, it's become a lot more pleasant to fold and unlock as well. But yeah, it's going to be a while for sure on this. When it eventually does, one cool feature I did notice on this PSA is that they actually have 2 set screws underneath, kind of attached to the trunnion here, that you can tighten, and then it'll push against the stock when it's locked in, just so that if you develop any wobble or if you just have a loose fitting stock in the first place, you can use that to take up any slack. That is a really good idea, I think. So if you can see where I'm pointing my light, that is the top set screw right here that I'm referring to. There's one right below the spring as well. Now, while I have this taken down, I did want to take a moment to also just look at the internals. First, starting with that recoil spring, I did say I would talk about why I'm using a buffer. So my reasoning for that is, usually I don't like these because they can induce malfunctions where there potentially wouldn't be ones before. And the reason for that is because it doesn't allow the bolt to travel all the way to the rear. But I'm using it on here because I have heard of the issues that PSA has with riveting, and I've seen it. These are not the best riveted. And furthermore, these are the wrong types of rivets. Generally on AKs, particularly on the front barrel trunnion right here, you're supposed to use swell head rivets, and they just use regular flat rivets all across the board. So given that they're kind of iffy on that, I wanted to reduce the wear that might show up on the rear trunnion as this is slamming back into it. So it's my only reason for using this here. I would say it's kind of a band-aid solution, and it may not even be necessary anyway, but yeah, just given what I'm seeing here with the rivets, that's why that is the way it is. Second, I did also want to take a look at how the bolt and the bolt carrier is wearing. So got a little bit of a kind of scoring mark here on the bottom of the bolt carrier, which is normal, and a little bit on the bolt itself. I don't have a huge round count, and actually some of this might just be, some of it's just wiping off. So yeah, it's not actually as bad as it looks. This is fairly, let's look at the front actually here. So there's some brass fragments, just wiping that off. There's more finish wear on here than I would expect for the extremely low round count. But that's how it's looking right now. And then everything else is just normal, as you would expect. They're pretty low wear, like on the piston head and all that. And then last, let's just look at the actual chamber here itself and the face. Again, a lot more brass fragments. It is tearing up the cases, clearly. But the barrel itself, on the face here, it looks fine so far. I'm moving a bit forward to the side rail and the side mount and everything. Absolutely no issues. This is clearly made well, made to spec. This is not moving at all. Now, I did mention earlier I was checking the zero on the sights, and they are actually fairly close on. It's understandable that they're not perfectly on, given that PSA would have to know exactly what type of ammo I'm using and what distance I want it zeroed at, but it's very close. It is on paper. It's a couple inches to the left and slightly down. I'll get it perfectly on later, but yeah, it is on paper. It's good for now. On the barrel itself, I did want to address also, this is a nitrided barrel on this AK, so not your regular chrome lined. Personally, given that this is a 5.56, I'm not terribly bothered. I still absolutely do prefer a chrome lined barrel, but given that I'm not shooting corrosive ammo and I'm not really taking this out a huge amount for like an SHTF rifle or anything like that. I'm not terribly bothered by it being just nitrided. Nitrided is pretty good overall from my experience. I would still say it's certainly not as good as chrome, but it's still very durable. Last, way up here at the muzzle end, I did want to touch on the brake and compensator right here. So of course this does resemble your traditional AK-74, AK-100 series of brake and comp combination muzzle devices, but it is definitely not. They did a lot of things differently here because even in this extremely bright, just midday sun, I was actually seeing a ton of muzzle flash on this, and furthermore, it is insanely blasty. I have not experienced this amount of blast. I have an actual Bulgarian one. I'll probably put that on here. I also have a Arsenal US made one. I'll test if that does any differently. But this one is, I really dislike it. I'll see if any of the slow motion footage that I captured when I was testing some of the other facets of this rifle, if you can maybe see any of the flash there, but it is bad. It is several feet of flame on each side of the brake and a little bit in front of it too. So I'm not a fan of that. And also, a little tertiary feature here that I wanted to touch on. If you notice, I was talking earlier about how the cleaning rod was a little bit of a loose fit. I don't even have it on here right now. It actually, it does not fit. The handguard retaining ring is a little bit oversized, very, very hard to see on a camera, but compared to your actual Comblock AKs, if you look here, so I'm using an authentic Russian AK-9 lower handguard here, and you'll see how much further in it goes compared to the handguard retaining ring right here. Just a huge, huge retaining ring, and it doesn't line up whatsoever, so I cannot use the cleaning rod. I kind of just wanted it there for aesthetic purposes. I use my own cleaning rod that I always have in my pack anyway, but still, kind of annoying that it doesn't fit. It's pretty much it for this video, but I will absolutely be doing more follow-up reviews on this at set round counts. I'm not sure, probably every 1,000 I'll do. I'll have a playlist linked in the description below on YouTube if you're on Rumble. I'll link all the upcoming videos as well there when they actually come out. So do be on the lookout for that if you want to just bookmark that playlist, keep an eye on it. I'll have a lot more coming on this in the future, not the near future. I'm going to take my time with this. I'm going to put it into rotation with the rest of my rifles and just, shoot it like normal. Other than that, as far as the build itself, this is pretty much how it's going to remain for the rest of the videos. Like I said, I'll probably try out the other muzzle devices as well. I'm going to do an accuracy test with this 100% because I am curious how well it'll shoot. And only other thing I'm going to be definitely changing is I will be putting probably an aim point on here, or maybe a fixed 4-power scope, just depending on how accurately it shoots. But yeah, this optic is a temporary one from my other rifle, so it's going to go back on there eventually. Hope you all found this interesting. If you do have any other questions whatsoever, feel free to leave those in the comments below. I always do read them. Thank you all for watching. Take care. Hope to see you all in the next one, which will be coming fairly soon. See you then.